Shalom. Welcome. I hope everybody's enjoying Take on the World 2020. I know with over 40 speakers, there's bound to be something there for everybody. For those of you that don't know me, my name's Gary Arbaugh. My wife Faye and I, we live at the southernmost point in the state of Ohio. From our home, it's just a few minutes walk down to the Ohio River. And we can look across the river and see West Virginia and Kentucky. As we slowly work our way off grid, our little 1 acre plot of ground has four gardens, 20 chickens, and the beginnings of a small orchard. Faye and I, we have the ministry called Torah Town. It's dedicated to providing free Torah-based resources for children and their families. There you will find books, animated videos, music, online games, activity pages, a whole lot more. My lovely wife, she also has a ministry called Warrior Women of Faith. It's a weekly podcast featuring testimonies from many individuals who have overcome adversity and worked through the darkness of their past so that the light of Yeshua, Jesus Christ, can illuminate the future with hope and clarity. Finally, we have our own video broadcasts on Take on the World TV YouTube channel. Faye's broadcast is called Hot Topics, in which she shares the microphone with her co-host and our dear friend Thomas Dunn. Thomas is a public speaker, filmmaker, and host of YouTube's Through the Black. My show is entitled Revelation Paradigm Shift. It's a weekly comprehensive study of the book of Revelation, where I attempt to expound upon my book of the same name. You know, as we dive into this study of the Antichrist, please understand that the very nature of this study requires an unbiased perspective, one that's not swayed by preconceived notions or opinions or public belief. It also requires a thorough and lengthy investigation. That's one of the reasons why I do the program, because sometimes we only cover 1 or 2 verses. But we need to inspect even the most minute detail according to the scriptures in order to verify or to contest the factuality of this research. There's many facets of this research that will undoubtedly take you by surprise or stir skepticism or even denial. So I encourage you to prayerfully examine all scripture references, quoted commentaries, and historical facts in order to validify what I'll be going through this afternoon. Now, me, just like so many other people, have had our opinions built upon false doctrines, personal beliefs, mainstream religious upbringing, and for myself, my mind was filled with an indiscriminate combination of all of this. And before I started writing the book, Revelation Paradigm Shift, I wanted to know the truth behind the book of Revelation. So I started off and I thought, wow, this is easy, but my mind kept coming back to the original thought processes that I had. So I basically had to start over and go verse by verse, in some cases word by word, and looking up the original meaning and seeing it in its context. It wasn't long before I was amazed at my findings. So I make no claim that this research is totally accurate. These are solely my findings. And the purpose of this study is just to get people thinking, to read for themselves, and to study and to test everything. So I pray that this presentation will be enlightening and inspiring and take you on a journey that will prepare you for what lies ahead and give you a new paradigm, a new perspective on what has already transpired. So at the very least, I just hope that it motivates you to consider other possibilities, to examine all things, and to inspire you to search the scriptures. So, with all that being said, let's begin. Revelation 12:17. And then the dragon became furious with the woman and went off to make war on the rest of her offspring, on those who keep the commandments of God and hold the testimony of Jesus Christ. You know, this dragon, Satan, has one main goal, and that is to prevent humans from entering into God's kingdom. His target of choice, as you can see, is those who keep the commandments of God and hold to the testimony of Jesus. Throughout this series, I've often explained that, unlike other books of the Bible, this testament is directed solely to the devout followers of Jesus Christ, Yeshua HaMashiach, and not to the general populace. You know, it's written only for those who have dedicated their lives to his service. Consider the very first verse in Revelation. The revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave him to show his servants the things that must soon take place. John, under the direction of the Messiah, is addressing this book to the followers of Yeshua and not to the general public. This passage, in and of itself, could very well explain why there's been so much confusion, division, and false interpretations regarding this book. Throughout the last 2 millennia, pastors, authors, teachers, laymen, and many others have used human interpretation as their sole means in their attempt to make sense of the words that John inscribed. I personally believe that this is the primary cause of all the confusion regarding this book. Yeshua, Jesus Christ himself, said in Matthew 15:24, I am not sent but unto the lost sheep of the house of Israel. You know, over and over again, Revelation tells to whom the book is written. To those who keep the commandments of God and the testimony of Jesus Christ. Revelation 1:2 says, who bore witness to the word of God and the testimony of Jesus Christ, even to all that he saw. Revelations 1:9, I, John, your brother and partner, was on the island called Patmos, on the account of the word of God and the testimony of Jesus. Revelation 12:17, we just read that one. Revelation 24, those who had been beheaded for the testimony of Jesus Christ and the Word of God. You know, throughout the world, there's only one group of people who fit this description. You know, mainstream Christianity, while they believe in Jesus, state that the law of God was done away with. Judaism, on the other hand, they have the Torah, the Word of God. Yet they deny Yeshua, Jesus Christ, as the Messiah. It's those messianic believers, those who hold fast to the Word of God, the Torah, and the testimony of Jesus Christ, that are the target of the dragon's wrath. So before we reveal the identity of the Antichrist, we must first find out where he comes from. Revelations 13:1. And I stood upon the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 diadems, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. Now, if you allow me just for a moment, I know many of you, if not most of you, are familiar with Daniel 2. But perhaps you may not have looked at it quite this way. You know, how in Daniel chapter 2, Nebuchadnezzar's dream is interpreted by Daniel. Beginning with Babylon, a succession of kingdoms would rise and fall, culminating with their total destruction upon the return of Jesus Christ, and with the establishment of the eternal kingdom. But there's one single factor that many overlook, and that is, aside from their geographic location, what commonality does each kingdom have? You know, each one ruled over the Jews. Babylon, 605 to 539 BC. You know, as a consequence of their long stay in Babylon, only 10% of those in captivity returned to their land. Since Nebuchadnezzar deported them in 586 BC, the Jews were influenced by all of the idolatry and astrology and sorcery that was practiced in Babylon. It was here that the Babylonian Talmud began, the oral law. Persia, 539 to 331 BC. A Persian prophet named Zoroaster began preaching a new ideology based around a single god called Ahura Mazda. It was one of the world's most monotheistic religions. It was one of the first monotheistic religions, recognizing only a single deity. His teaching spread across Persia's society, including the Jews. Now, according to Zoroastrianism, earthly life was a constant struggle between good and evil. All people suffered, and this suffering was to prepare people for a future life. In the afterlife, humans would have to choose between good and evil in a final judgment. This final judgment and all of the world was watched over by Ahura Mazda, who was the very embodiment of goodness and wisdom. If these ideas sound familiar, Zoroastrians influenced the ancient Hebrews and their concept of faith. This led to the Zohar, which is Kabbalah. Those two evil doctrinal systems came out of this: the Babylonian Talmud and the Zohar, which is Kabbalah. Greece, 331 to 168 BC. It was during this time that Jews flocked to the entertainments of Greece, at which the athletes competed, most of them naked. The Jews even attempted to undo their circumcisions surgically, which the Greek encouraged because they considered circumcision a blemish on the supposedly perfect human body. Even worse, after the sporting events, participants offered sacrifices to the Greek gods. Following such practices, a number of Jews adopted Greek names, studied Greek literature and philosophy, and cast off Torah observance. These Jews became known as Hellenists and looked with disdain at their religious, less modern brothers. Jews also moved to the Greek centers, such as Alexandria, which was a major Hellenist city where Jews attained great affluence and rapidly assimilated into the Greek culture. And it was here that the religious party of the Pharisees emerged. You know, the heretics which Jesus Christ, Yeshua, confronted throughout his ministry. They had illegally overtaken the Levitical priesthood and temple service and had the Jews in an iron claw. Rome, of all the countries that we are familiar with, Rome seems to be the most predominant because of Yeshua, Jesus Christ, and what went on in his lifetime. But Rome ruled in 168 BC all the way through 476 AD. And in Rome, Jewish communities enjoyed privileges and thrived economically, and they was a significant part of the empire's population, almost, if not more than 10%. The book of Acts in the New Testament, as well as other Pauline texts, make frequent reference to the large population of Hellenized Jews in the cities of the Roman world. One can see by reading the Gospels of Matthew, Luke, and Mark how the Pharisees would attempt to use and to manipulate the Roman government to do their bidding, especially in regards to the execution of Christ. The doctrines of the Pharisees in the time of the Gospels was only by oral tradition, but this was later published in writing in 500 AD. The Babylonian Talmud of our time is the same doctrine as then. The Talmud, if you didn't know, is the national religion of Israel. Consider the words of Jesus to the church of Smyrna. Revelation 2:9. I know thy works, and tribulation, and poverty, but thou art rich. And I know the blasphemy of them which say they are Jews and are not, but are of the synagogue of Satan. The word blaspheme literally means to hurt, injure, damage the fame or reputation of someone else. But there is a name for blasphemy. The word name is Strong's 3686. It's singular in form. The plural form of the word, as you can see, is overate. This tells us that there is a single name that blasphemes God. I'll be going over this in depth in a later episode. For now, Revelation 13:2. And the beast that I saw was like a leopard. Its feet were like a bear's, and its mouth was like a lion's mouth. And to it the dragon gave his power and his throne and great authority. Consider each description. The beast was like a leopard, like a bear, like a lion. Being like something means to be similar to. Being similar is not the same as being the original. So there are two other places in Scripture where this combination of animals occur. The first account to consider is of God's judgment of Israel. In Hosea 13:6-9, it says, according to their pasture, so they were filled. They were filled, and their heart was exalted. Therefore, they have forgotten me. Therefore, I will be unto them as a lion. As a leopard by the way, I will observe them. I will meet them as a bear that is bereaved of her whelps. And I will rend the caul of their heart, and there I will devour them like a lion. The wild beast shall tear them. O Israel, thou hast destroyed thyself, but in me is thine help. The second account is in Daniel chapter 7. And I've purposely avoided inserting too much of the Daniel Revelation connection throughout my studies, because I want to show that all of Scripture must be studied to get an accurate image of the events that are soon to occur. Although the fact that both Daniel and John saw beasts and horns does not necessarily mean that their visions are identically related. Unlike the book of Daniel, the book of Revelation was not to be sealed. Compare this. Revelation 22:10. And he said unto me, seal not the sayings of the prophecy of this book, for the time is at hand. In Daniel 12:4, it says, but thou, O Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book, even until the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased. There are a number of other indicators concerning their visions which show that God was giving them different aspects of the same rulers and governments related to the world dominion throughout history and the final form of the beast power prior to the Messiah's return. So, the book of Daniel, sealed until the time of the end, has nevertheless been erroneously interpreted in countless ways. Throughout the centuries, there has been so many different interpretations, different visions of what Daniel is supposed to represent. I feel personally that its contents will not be fully understood until the advent of the Antichrist. As we already saw in Hosea 13:6-9, the similarity of Israel's punishment when compared to how those who call themselves Jews but are not, how they will treat others is nearly identical. Being of the synagogue of Satan, we see that Satan the dragon will give power to the beast. But, where does this beast come from? Book of Revelations tells of two witnesses who will prophesy and testify during this time. In Revelations 11:7-8, and when they have finished their testimony, the beast that rises from the bottomless pit will make war on them, and conquer them and kill them, and their dead bodies will lie in the street of that great city that is symbolically called Sodom and Egypt, where their Lord was crucified. There is only one city in the world where the Lord was crucified. Matthew 23:37. O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, thou that killest the prophets, and stones them which are sent to you. How often I would have gathered thy children together, even as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, and you would not. Revelation 18:18-20. And cried when they saw the smoke of her burning, saying, what city is likened to this great city? And they cast dust on their heads, and cried, weeping and wailing, saying, alas, alas, that great city, wherein we were made rich, all that had ships in the sea, by reason of her costliness. For in 1 hour she is made desolate. Rejoice over her, thou heaven, and ye holy apostles and prophets, for God has avenged you on her. Let's take a little look here. Genesis 49:8-10. Judah, thou art he whom thy brethren shall praise. Your hand will be at the neck of your enemies, and your father's children will bow down before you. Judah is a lion's whelp. From the prey, my son, thou art gone up. He stooped down, he couched as a lion. And as an old lion, who shall rouse him up? The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet until Shiloh, that means the Messiah, shall come. And unto him shall the gathering of the people be. You know, we tend to look at the blessings of Jacob in a positive light. But what if we looked at them in the terms of Revelation? Let's reflect on this for just a moment. Nor a lawgiver from between his feet until the Messiah comes. You know, the word lawgiver is Strong's H2710. Hakak is a primitive root, properly to hack, that is to engrave, by implication to enact laws, being cut in stone metal tablets in primitive times, or generally prescribe, appoint, decree, governor, grave, lawgiver. You see what I'm saying? It is basically a person or person who creates laws and enforces them. But why would there be a need for more laws? Ecclesiastes 12:11 says, the words of the wise are like goads, and like nails firmly fixed are the collected sayings. That is the Torah, which has already been given. And they are given by one shepherd, that is Yeshua, Jesus Christ. Continuing in Ecclesiastes, my son, beware of anything beyond these. The making of books there is no end, and much study is weariness of the flesh. The end of the matter, all has been heard. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. You know, in Hasidic Judaism, beyond the scriptures from the Old Testament, the Torah, the Nevi'im, the Ketuvim, known collectively as the Tanakh, there is also the oral law, the Mishnah, the Talmud, and dozens of others, including the Noahide laws. Hasidic Judaism does not recognize Jesus Christ, Yeshua HaMashiach, as the Messiah. Therefore, they continue to make laws. The final lawgiver will be the false prophet at the time of Christ's return. You know, I kind of find it morbidly amusing that the primitive root word for lawgiver is to hack, since beheading is the penalty for any non-Jew that opposes the Noahide laws. Truly, thy father's children shall bow down before thee. Revelations 13:3. One of his heads seemed to have had a mortal wound, but its mortal wound was healed, and the whole earth marveled as they followed the beast. You know, some have wrongly interpreted this to mean the first beast will receive a head wound, appear to have died, and then come back to life. But notice it says only one of its heads was wounded. Revelation 13:14 says it is wounded by a sword. You know, the head that is speaking of, and I'll be going into greater detail on this, but in order to get us to the Antichrist, the head that was wounded was the sixth head. According to everything that I've studied, it was the dispersion of the Jews by Rome. But, you know, you might think that it's the German Holocaust, according under Adolf Hitler. That's fine too. Either way you look at it, when Israel was received their statehood in 1948, the whole world marveled. Never in history had a nation regained its territory in such a way. Revelation 13:14 says, and they worshipped the dragon, for he had given his authority to the beast. And they worshipped the beast, saying, who is like the beast, and who can fight against it? By many, 2017 marked the Jubilee year for the State of Israel. Popularity of the region has escalated in many forms. In the past few years, tourism has nearly doubled. Excavations and discovery of ancient artifacts and locations have reached an all-time high. At the time that I wrote Revelation Paradigm Shift, the conflicts in the Middle East was preventing a worldwide acceptance of the State of Israel. But that's quickly changing. On August 14th of this year, just a few days ago, an agreement was announced by President Trump between Israel and the United Arab Emirates to normalize relations between their two states. The international community has mostly welcomed the move, with the exception of the Palestinians, Iran, and Turkey, who denounce it. Despite all of this, President Trump has said that he expects more Arab and Muslim nations to sign treaties with Israel. The Jews are planning on building a third temple. They're awaiting their promised Messiah ben David. Muslims, they're awaiting their Mahdi. Christians are waiting for their supposed rapture. It's going to be interesting to see how the enemy uses all those expectations to deceive these groups. Finally, there's the astrological sign of September 23rd, 2017. Did that mark the final Jubilee? If so, we're well on our way towards some interesting times ahead. Midsummer of next year would be the 3.5-year mark. We'll see. Revelations 13:5. And the beast was given a mouth, uttering haughty and blasphemous words, and it was allowed to exercise authority for 42 months. Notice here, the beast was given a mouth. There will be an individual of authority representing both the State of Israel and its Talmudic belief system, who will promote the state and enforce its laws. Revelation 13:6. And it opened its mouth to utter blasphemies against God, blaspheming his name and his dwelling, that is, those who dwell in heaven. There's so much I've already alluded to in regards to the Noahide laws. So it's at this point that I'd like to expound on it, especially in regards to its global impact. The Noahide laws are also known as the Noahide Code, the Universal Noahide Codes, 7 laws of Noah, 7 moral laws, 7 commandments, divine law, universal ethics, Noahide, divine code, B'nai Noah, and it's even referred to as the Rainbow Covenant. These 7 man-made moral codes are being used as a substitute for God's 10 Commandments. In the United States, for example, 1978, the U.S. Congress asked President Carter to designate Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, also known as the Reb, his birthday as the National Education and Sharing Day to recognize and pay tribute to his efforts for a better education for all America. Education and Sharing Day was established by the United States Congress in honor of the Reb, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson. And it calls for increased focus on education and recognize lifelong efforts. Since 1978, Education and Sharing Day USA has been proclaimed annually by each and every president of the Rebbe's birthday on the Jewish calendar, which is the 11th of Nisan. That's 4 days before Passover. And it generally falls between March the 21st and April 21st on the Gregorian calendar. But who is Menachem Mendel Schneerson? Known to many as the Lubavitcher Rebbe, or simply as the Rebbe, was a Russian Empire-born American Orthodox Jewish rabbi. The most recent Rebbe of the Lubavitcher Hasidic dynasty. It's the largest of about a dozen forms of Hasidism, which is a version of Orthodox Judaism, but is connected to mysticism. He's considered one of the most influential Jewish leaders of the 20th century. And as leader of the Chabad Lubavitch movement, he took a tiny, small Hasidic group of believers that almost came to an end during the Holocaust and transformed it into one of the most influential movements in religious Jewry. It has an international network of over 3,000 educational and social centers. Schneerson's published teachings fill over 300 volumes. He's noted for his contributions to Jewish continuity and religious thought, as well as his wide-range contributions to traditional Torah scholarship. And he is also recognized as the pioneer of Jewish outreach. So, you may be asking yourself, why is this significant? Well, during his lifetime, many of his students believed that he was the Messiah. Schneerson's own attitude on this subject, and whether he encouraged this belief or not, is debated. But he died on June the 12th, 1994. Many followers refused to accept the fact of his death after 1994. Ever since, Chabad is torn between those who openly declare that he's still alive and the antis who accept the fact of his death. A very small group within the Chabad claims that Schneerson was not only the Messiah, but that he was divine as well. God above God. You can check that out just doing a Wikipedia search on his name. The Proclamation 4921 of April the 3rd, 1982. I'd like to take a moment to read this to you, the National Day of Reflection, by the President of the United States of America. A proclamation amid the distractions and concerns of our daily existence. It is appropriate that Americans pause to reflect upon the ancient ethical principles and moral values which are the foundation of our character as a nation. We seek and steadfastly pursue the benefits of education. But education must be more than factual enlightening. It must enrich the character as well as the mind. One shining example for all people of all faiths of what education ought to be is that provided by the Lubavitch movement headed by Rabbi Menachem Schneerson, a worldwide spiritual leader who will celebrate his 80th birthday on April the 4th, 1982. The Lubavitcher Rebbe's work stands as a reminder that knowledge is an unworthy goal unless it is accompanied by moral and spiritual wisdom and understanding. He has provided a vivid example of the eternal validity of the 7 Noahide laws, a moral code for all of us regardless of religious faith. May he go from strength to strength. In recognition of the Lubavitcher Rebbe's 80th birthday, the Senate and the House of Representatives of the United States in Congress assembled have issued House Joint Resolution 447 to set aside April 4th, 1982 as a National Day of Reflection. Now therefore I, Ronald Reagan, President of the United States of America, do hereby proclaim April the 4th, 1982 as National Day of Reflection. In witness thereof, I have hereunto set my hand, this 3rd day of April in the year of our Lord, 1982, and of the independence of the United States of America, the 206th. Ronald Reagan. You know, this is a major event that's been overlooked throughout the years. Literally, we signed off onto the 7 Noahide laws. As a nation, we have agreed to abide by them.
That's great.
Even closer?
Yeah, even closer.
Things probably have to go this way a little bit too.
Yeah. If they want to come right behind the president, that would be, yeah, that's better. Okay. Yes.
Okay.
Just use this pen here. And please give my warmest regards to the Rabbi on this his 86th birthday.
Thank you very much.
The Rabbi sends his regards to you, Mr. President, and he expresses his wishes, as he always did, that you should be able to carry out the extraordinary role that the Almighty has assigned to you, as you have until now, with health and happiness, together with the First Lady, for many years to come. In whatever position you'll be filling, we all look forward to you to continue the great work, historical work that you have started on behalf of education, specifically by returning the traditional values which have been the bedrock of civilization ever since beginning. And these are the 7 Noahide laws. These are the 7 Noahide laws. These are the 7 Noahide laws contained and given by Moses, as it is reflected here.
You know, even President George Bush, the old George Bush, wrote in his proclamation in 1989, he said, "And it is fitting that we honor Rabbi Schneerson and acknowledge his important contributions to society. Our great nation takes just pride in its dedication to the principles of justice, equality, and truth of the Noahide laws. Americans also understand that we have a responsibility to inspire the same dedication into future generations." The U.S. promotion of Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson marks only the beginning of universal acceptance of these Noahide laws. Every president since at least Jimmy Carter has entertained these laws as a basis of world civilization. You know, with United States backing, this belief system has already sprouted among many other countries. The spokesman and founder and director of the UN NGO, the Institute of Noahide Code, Rabbi Yaakov Cohen, has been pushing for the United Nations to abide by the Noahide codes. So how did all this begin? Moses Maimonides, Rambam. He's the writer of the Mishnah Torah. He's considered one of the greatest Jewish Talmudic thinkers of medieval rabbinical Judaism. He believed that Gentiles who refused to keep the Noahide laws should be executed by beheading. Today, that's considered an Islamic specialty. In regards to Islam, Jewish rabbinic believers generally considered Islam monotheistic. So they are therefore covered under the Noahide laws. All idolaters who refuse to give up their faith are considered in violation of the Noahide laws and are under the penalty of death. Very similar to Islam's convert or die strategy. The prophet Noah is clearly seen as a lawgiver in the Quran. It's thought that the Almighty Lord reveals to the prophet Noah that he also revealed to the other prophets and the prophet of Islam. In Surah Nuh 71:1, it says, "And we sent Noah to his people. Do thou warn thy people before there comes to them a grievous penalty." Some have even suggested that the 7 Masani laws refer to the 7 laws of Noah. When we compare the 7 Noahide laws to the Quran, we can see that each of them, the prohibition of idolatry, the prohibition of blasphemy, the prohibition of sexual immorality, of homicide, of theft, imperative legal system, the creation of their own legal system, and the prohibition of the limbs of living creatures, eating the limbs off of living creatures. I wanted to address the connection of Rabbidic Judaism to Islam in order to familiarize you with the concept that it would not be too difficult to incorporate one into the other once the issue regarding the Prophet Muhammad was reconciled. Christianity, on the other hand, they are considered as idolaters due to its Trinitarian beliefs, doctrines, the belief in Jesus Christ, Yeshua HaMashiach, as the Messiah, and crucifixes as objects of worship. However, in more modern times, Christianity has slowly been shifting into the Noahide law camp, beginning to acknowledge the superiority of Judaism as compared to the now decreasing popularity of the health wealth gospel. Maimonides, the Rambam, wrote in Malachim 8:14, "Anyone that accepts the 7 commandments and is careful to perform them is considered one of the pious of the nations, and he has a portion in the world to come. This is, if he accepts them and does them, because the Holy One, blessed be he, commanded them in the Torah and informed us through Moses, our teacher, that non-Jews were already commanded in them. But he does them because they seem reasonable. He is not a Ger Toshav, nor one of the pious of the nations, but he is one of their wise ones." A Ger Toshav is a foreigner or alien in the land of Israel. Is someone who agrees to be bound by the 7 laws of Noah. Revelation 13:7. "And it was also allowed to make war on the saints and to conquer them, and authority was given to it over every tribe and people and language and nation." The supposed simplicity and universalism of the Noahide laws will be the unification factor across the world. The goal is to usher in universal Noahide laws that they believe will bring peace to the earth. Daniel 8:25. "And throughout his policy, he also shall cause the craft to prosper in his hand, and he shall magnify himself in his heart, and by peace shall destroy many." Daniel 7:25. And it speaks words against the Most High, and it wears out the set apart ones of the Most High. And it intends to change the appointed times, which are the feast days, and the law, which is the Torah. And they are given into its hand for a time, times, and half a time. As we've already seen, the Noahide laws, also known as the 7 universal laws of man, as they're listed in the Talmud, the prohibition of idolatry, the prohibition of murder, the prohibition of theft, the prohibition of sexual promiscuity, the prohibition of blasphemy, the prohibition of cruelty to animals, and the requirement to have just laws. That doesn't sound too awful bad, does it? As a matter of fact, it sounds pretty sweet. But it's just that on the surface, as you begin to look into these things, into each of these laws, you're going to see what John saw when he ate of the little book. Revelation 10:10. And I took the little book out of the angel's hand, and I ate it up, and it was in my mouth, sweet as honey. And as soon as I had eaten it, my belly was bitter. These laws, along with those who promote them, are telling people that there are 2 sets of laws. One for the Jews, the Yahudim, and the other for the Gentiles, the Goyim. And we know that this is not scriptural. We are told in Exodus 12:49 that there is one Torah for the native born and for the stranger who sojourns among you. A Goyim is any of the non-Jewish nations considered as polytheistic and idolatrous. The Hebrew word goy had for some time acquired the meaning of heathen, a person with the soul of a beast. Allow me to give you a little taste of these laws. The first one, prohibition of idolatry. It actually includes 57 commandments within it. Some examples include no idol worship in 4 standard ways. The application to Gentiles is required. Mandated punishment for violation, the death penalty. A little brief description is not to worship any false god in any one of 4 standard ways. An example of that is not to verbally accept Jesus as one's God or Lord. The second one, commandments against blasphemy. It includes 39 additional commandments. It is no idol worship. Application to Gentiles, required. Mandated punishment, death penalty. A description of this is not to utter a curse against God, such as God forbid, in speech. For Gentiles, death penalty would be enforced against one who blasphemes the true God by any name for him. Whether you use God, Jehovah, Yahweh, any name that you use would be considered blasphemy. In any language, whenever at least one reliable witness can testify regarding the crime, as long as the testimony is supported by all other evidence, the death penalty. The third one, commandments against murder. There's only 6 additional commandments on these. However, one of them is to exile a manslaughterer to a city of refuge. According to Scripture, that's what they did. Application to Gentiles, partially required. Mandated punishment is partly the death penalty. Brief description enclosed here is that for courts to require a convicted manslaughterer to live out his days in one of the designated cities of refuge. But cities of refuge do not exist under the theocratic law for Gentiles. So any Gentile who accidentally murders a Jew is subject to the death penalty and has no refuge. The fourth one, commandments against theft. Here are listed 37 more. And I find it interesting, one of the sub-laws within this is to penalize the seducer of a virgin. The application to Gentiles is required. Mandated punishment, death penalty. Brief description. A man who seduces an unmarried woman into having consenting relations receives punishment, provided that at the time of the act, she was both between 3 years and 12.5 years of age and a virgin. Jewish law mandates that various sanctions for a Jewish seducer, but theocratic courts for Gentiles are required to reinforce this commandment with capital punishment. You see what this is saying? That within the Noahide laws, a Jewish man can seduce a child between the ages of 3 and 12.5 years of age and get off with various sanctions. Maybe have to pay a fine. But for Gentiles, it's the death penalty. Anyways, I believe that's enough. I think you get the message. If you were to avail yourself of the time, and I pray that you do, to read over the Noahide laws. Basically, what's going to happen is that you will find 2 sets of rules. One for the Jew and another for the Gentile. This nice little book of 7 laws turns out to be a total of 620. None of which are very appealing unless you are a Hasidic Jew or a Hasidic Gentile. So I encourage you to please take the time to familiarize yourself with these laws and their punishments. Because one day you will be subjected to them. They can be found at the Hasidic University.org. Just click on Studies in Theocratic Law, and there they are. Revelations 13:8. And all who dwell on the earth will worship it, everyone whose name has not been written before the foundation of the world in the book of life of the Lamb, who was slain. Revelations 13:10. If anyone is to be taken captive, into captivity he goes. If anyone is to be slain with the sword he must be slain. Here is a call for the endurance and the faith of the saints. Right here in the middle of the page in Revelations 13:9, it says, if anyone has an ear, let him hear. You know, this is a solemn warning to pay close attention to what is to be said. It can be easily translated as anybody has understanding, let him pay attention. You know, if anyone is to be taken captive, into captivity he goes. If he's to be slain with the sword he must be slain. This verse shows the power and the authority that will be given to this first beast government and the Noahide laws. They will be enforced to the fullest extent on a worldwide scale. Anyone failing to obey them will be imprisoned or decapitated. You know, there will be no plea bargaining, no delay of sentencing. Those true followers of Yeshua, Jesus Christ, are called to endure these times ahead and to continue in their faith and their commitment to God's holy word. So stand strong, even in the face of death. by decapitation. So now, without further ado, let's look into the second beast, the Antichrist. Revelations 13:11. Then I saw another beast rising up out of the earth. It had 2 horns like a lamb, and it spoke like a dragon. This description is so easily understood that it bears little explanation. This person will basically come out of nowhere. He will gradually gain social, religious, and political recognition and authority. Then he will finally claim to be the Messiah. Without giving away too much at this point, it's my personal belief that the reason behind the promoting of all this ancestral DNA testing is to discover who is genetically the most qualified. By doing a little bit of research, one can find that the most prominent DNA testing facilities are owned by Gene. It's a Jewish-owned commercial genetic test company based in Houston, Texas. The company is owned by Bennett Greenspan and Max Blankfield, and it's the parent company of Family Tree DNA, Arbaugh, and many others. And just to let you know, Gene by Gene is performing DNA diagnostic tests to detect nucleic acid from the SARS-CoV-2 virus that causes COVID-19. Revelation 13:12. It exercises all authority of the first beast in his presence and makes the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast whose mortal wound was healed. Just as Yeshua exercised all the authority of the Father, as in Matthew 28:18, which says, "And Jesus came to them and said, All authority in heaven and on earth has been given unto me." This Messiah impersonator will enforce all of the authority of the first beast government. Revelation 13:13 says it performs great signs, even making fire come down from heaven to the earth in front of people. Throughout Scripture, God, Yahweh, has used fire from heaven to show his power, his justice, and his sovereignty. So what better way for the second beast to deceive the masses than to perform miracles that mimics the power of God? Since the time of Christ, this type of miracle has been withheld from mankind. You consider the hot-headed sons of thunder, James and John. And they were called that in Mark 3:17. They wanted to call fire down from heaven in judgment of a Samaritan village that didn't welcome Yeshua, Jesus Christ. But in Luke 9:54 and 55, it says, "And when the disciples, James and John, saw this, they said, Lord, wilt thou that we command fire to come down from heaven and consume them, even as Elias did? But he turned and rebuked them and said, Ye know not what manner of spirit ye are of." Jesus admonished them because he knew that this type of miracle would be one of the signs that would prove the identity of the false prophet, the Antichrist. Fire come down from heaven. It shows that the false prophet does indeed perform counterfeit signs to convince mankind of his power. This false prophet will deceive believers and unbelievers alike. He will do these miracles and wonders, and they will all be accomplished through satanic power. This is part of Satan's great deception. Revelation 13:14. And by the signs that it is allowed to work in the presence of the beast, it deceives those who dwell on the earth, telling them to make an image for the beast that was wounded by the sword yet lived. You know, some believe this image is the original Ark of the Covenant based on Numbers 7:89. Even the Quran prophesies about its reappearing. In the Quran 2:248, and their prophet said to them, indeed, a sign of his kingship is that the ark will come to you, in which is assurance from your Lord, and a remnant of what the family of Moses and the family of Aaron had left, carried by the angels. Indeed, in it, that is a sign for you, if you are believers. However, in this verse, the false prophet tells them to make it. If it is the Ark of the Covenant, it's going to be a forgery, an impostor. And it's going to need a place to reside. The third tabernacle, the third temple. This false prophet has already called down fire from heaven back in verse 13. And it's a direct correlation to Numbers 9:15, which says, and on that day that the tabernacle was reared up, the cloud covered the tabernacle, namely the tent of testimony. And at evening there was upon the tabernacle as it were the appearance of fire until the morning. Please, also consider Revelation 11:19. Then God's temple in heaven was opened, and the ark of his covenant was seen within his temple. There were flashes of lightning, rumblings, peals of thunder, an earthquake, and heavy hail. The true ark that John sees in his vision of heaven is, in my opinion, not the same ark that Moses constructed. We all know that articles in the tabernacle were mere copies of the heavenly things. In Hebrews 9:23, thus it was necessary for the copies of the heavenly things to be purified with these rites, but the heavenly things themselves with much better sacrifices than these. Even the sanctuary itself was just a copy and a shadow of what is in heaven. Hebrews 8:5. They serve as a copy and a shadow of the heavenly things. For when Moses was about to erect the tent, he was instructed by God, saying, see that you make everything according to the pattern that was shown to you on the mountain. So, if one copy was made, why not another? Revelation 13:14 states that the false prophet tells them to make an image for the beast. Since he's already performed miracles in front of the people, why wouldn't they believe that he was a real prophet? As final proof, let me submit to you 2 Thessalonians 2:3-4. Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come, except there come first a falling away, and that the man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition, who opposes and exalts himself against every so-called God or object of worship, so that he takes his seat in the temple of God, proclaiming himself to be God. Notice that it says his seat and not God's seat in the temple. To me, this shows that if the image for the beast is the Ark of the Covenant in the third temple, it will be a forgery. One more point that I would like to add for your consideration that shows that this Ark is going to be some sort of knockoff is the return of Jesus Christ. If Yeshua returns, wouldn't you think he would take his seat on the ark if it was legitimate? You know, it says in regards to the millennial reign in Jeremiah 3:15 and 16, "And I will give you shepherds after my own heart, who will feed you with knowledge and understanding. And when you have multiplied and been fruitful in the land, in those days declares the Lord, they shall no more say, the ark of the covenant of the Lord. It shall not come to mind, or be remembered, or missed, and it shall not be made again." You know, my personal opinion regarding this image of the beast is that it will be the ark inside of the third temple. Revelation 13:15. "And it was allowed to give breath to the image of the beast, so that the image of the beast might even speak, and might cause those who would not worship the image of the beast to be slain." In Numbers 7:89, "And when Moses went into the tent of the meeting to speak with the Lord, he heard the voice speaking to him from above the mercy seat that was on the ark of the testimony, from between the two cherubim, and it spoke to him." This Ark of the Covenant is where the voice of God emanated. However, according to my understanding, this remanufactured ark is a forgery, and so is the voice that will be spoken through it. In Revelation 13:16 it says, "Also it will cause all, both small and great, both rich and poor, both free and slave, to be marked on the right hand or on the forehead." This mark will be the polar opposite of Yahweh's seal. The word here for "calls" might give us some clue as to what the mark will be like. The word "calls" is Strong's G4160, poeho. Apparently it's a prolonged form of an obsolete primary, to make or to do. It goes on to mean agree, to appoint, to band together, to bear with, to lay wait, to make, and to transgress the law. It says here to compare it to G4238. Strong's tells us to compare it, so let's just do that. Preso, a primary verb meaning to practice, that is, to perform repeatedly or habitually. So basically, the mark of this false prophet will band people together and cause them to continually transgress the law. The next verse tells us, "So that no one can buy or sell unless he has the mark, that is, the name of the beast or the number of its name." So as we'll soon see, the only way to participate in any form of commerce is to transgress the law. Revelation 13:18. "This calls for wisdom. Let the one who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. Throughout the modern era, mankind has tried every way to decode this elusive number. I personally remember when people thought that Ronald Wilson Reagan was the Antichrist simply because the letters of his name was 6, 6, and 6. Many others have been accused of being this man of perdition. Saddam Hussein, George H.W. Bush, Ayatollah Khomeini, Osama bin Laden, Barack Obama, lots of others. Not only have people been accused, but with the advent of technology, objects have been speculated as being the mark. The TV, computers, RFID chips, Facebook, CERN, the list goes on and on. But I propose stepping back and looking at a passage from a different angle. Another paradigm shift, if you will. So let's revisit this phrase, let him that hath understanding calculate the number of the beast. The word number in Greek is Strong's G706, arithmos. It means as a number or taken up. It comes from the root word ario. Is a primary verb meaning to lift, or by implication, to take up or away. Figuratively, it means to raise, as in raise your voice. To keep in suspense in your mind. By Hebraism, it's H5375. To expiate sin. To take up, to carry off, to lift up. To expiate sin. Expiation, it's the act of making amends or reparation for guilt or wrongdoing. It's atonement. So let's keep this thought in our minds while we continue. Modern translators, like the one we just read, rendered the number as 6, 6, and 6. But by looking into the possibility of Revelation being originally written in the Aramaic, the way some people proclaim, here's what I discovered. In the Hebrew, if it was written out, the phrase 666 would look like this. In Aramaic, it appears thus. So if both of these were written prior to the Greek, it would have been written as 666. But in both the Aramaic and the Hebrew, if we were to drop the and, it would appear as 3 numerical sixes. 6, 6, and 6. But neither one of them do this. So therefore, the number 666 is not an accurate translation. The word is actually G5516. Chi-Z stigma. It's the 22nd, 14th, and an obsolete letter, which is G4742, as a cross, the X that you see, of the Greek alphabet. If used as numbers, they would denote, respectively, 600, 60, and 6. But if we look at the letters individually, chi, derived from the Latin, is a X, often used to abbreviate the name of Christ. as in the holiday Christmas, where they put the Xmas on there. When fused with a single type space using the Greek letter rho, it is called the labarum, and it's used to represent the person of Jesus Christ. The next letter, Z, samak in Hebrew. It means to lean on or uphold. And finally, stigma, from a primary word meaning to stick, to a mark incised or punched for recognition of ownership. Figuratively, it means to scar of service, a mark. Stigma is defined as a mark of disgrace associated with a particular circumstance, quality, or person. Synonyms for a stigma include shame, disgrace, dishonor, to stain, taint, to blot or blemish, to brand, to mark, or to slur. So now that we have all the facts regarding this elusive number, please allow me to put it all together. Whether it is translated from the Greek, which is read from left to right, or from the original Aramaic, which is read from right to left, it is exactly the same. What we have is chi zi stigma. It is a disgrace to uphold Jesus Christ. This false prophet Antichrist will claim that it is a disgrace to uphold Jesus Christ. He will cause others to renounce Christ or be killed by beheading according to Noahide law. Remember when I showed you the first commandment of the Noahide law prohibiting idolatry? Application to Gentiles is required. Mandated punishment for violation, the death penalty. Not to verbally accept Jesus as one's God or Lord. In 1 John 2, verses 22 and 23, who is the liar but the one who denies that Jesus is the Christ? Who is it? This is the Antichrist, the one who denies the Father and the Son. How much plainer can this be? Whoever denies the Son does not have the Father. The one who confesses the Son has the Father also. Remember, we're to count the value, arithmos, of He who is the expiation of our sins. We must be willing to accept death in order to gain the eternal victory. Is Jesus Christ worth dying for? Revelation 20, verse 4. And I saw thrones, and they that sat upon them, and judgment was given unto them, and I saw the souls of them that were beheaded for the witness of Jesus, and for the word of God, and which had not worshipped the beast, neither his image, neither had received his mark upon their foreheads or in their hands. And they lived and reigned with Christ 1,000 years. You know, I'd like to take a moment to share a few passages regarding the cost of discipleship. Counting the cost. In Luke 14, 25 through 33. And there went great multitudes with him, and he turned and he said to them, If any man come unto me, and hate not his father and mother, and wife and children and brethren and sisters, yea, his own life also, he cannot be my disciple. For whosoever does not bear his cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. For which of you, intending to build a tower, sits not down first and counts the cost, whether he has sufficient to finish it? Lest haply, after he's laid the foundation and is not able to finish it, And all that look at it begin to mock him, saying, "This man started to build and wasn't able to finish." Or what king, going to make war against another king, doesn't sit down first and consults whether he would be able with 10,000 to meet him that comes against him with 20,000? Or else, while the other is yet a great way off, he sends an ambassador and desires conditions of peace. So likewise, whosoever be of you that forsakes not all that he has, he cannot be my disciple. In Matthew 10:38 and 39, it tells us, "He that takes not his cross and follows after me is not worthy of me. He that finds his life shall lose it, and that he that loses his life for my sake shall find it." Matthew 16, verse 24 and 26. Then Jesus said to his disciples, "If any man would come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. For whosoever will save his life shall lose it. And whoever will lose their life for my sake will find it. For what profiteth a man if he should gain the whole world and lose his own soul? Or what shall a man give in exchange for his soul?" So, since we now have the meaning of the mark of the beast, who would say such a thing? What is the name of the beast? You know, the oldest accusation in all of Christendom would probably be Nero Caesar. When his name is counted in the Greek, translated into Hebrew, then totaling the value of the Hebrew letters, it adds up to 3 6s. He was, after all, said to have seized the Christians as scapegoats for fire and then burned them alive. But his full name was Nero Claudius Caesar Augustus Germanus. Add all that up in Hebrew. Plus the fact that he's been dead since June the 9th of 68 AD kind of rules him out. And then next is the Pope. Just pick one. There's been 266 popes, and nearly every one of them has been accused of being the Antichrist. So I think we can strike them off the list as well. One reason they do proclaim the name Jesus Christ. Now, whether it's the right one or not, that's a topic of another discussion. But we also have kings, presidents, queens, Islamic supremacists, religious leaders, businessmen, world dictators, ad infinitum. So let's consider again Revelation 13:11. "And I behold another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spoke as a dragon." When we look at 2 Thessalonians 2, 3, and 4, what we began this program with, "Let no man deceive you by any means, for except there come a falling away first, and that the man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition, who opposes and exalts himself against every so-called God or object of worship, so that he takes his seat in the temple of God, proclaiming himself to be God." So we know that this false prophet convinces others to worship the first beast. He does miracles. He operates out of Jerusalem. He takes his seat in the temple. He proclaims to be God. And his mark is that it's a disgrace to uphold Jesus Christ. He's described as having 2 horns like a lamb, symbolizing a counterfeit Messiah. And by operating out of Jerusalem and sitting in the temple, he has to be Jewish, as no non-Jewish person was allowed in the temple. For your consideration, there are 2 keep out or die signs from the temple that are still in existence. They read, "No foreigner may enter within the balustrade around the sanctuary and the enclosure. Whoever is caught, on himself shall he put blame for the death which will ensue." To the east of the court was Solomon's porch, and to the north, the Sereg, the middle wall of separation, a stone wall which separated the public area from the inner sanctuary. That was where only the Jews could enter. There was this sign, "Let no foreigner enter within the parapet and the partition which surrounds the temple precincts. Anyone caught violating will be held accountable for his ensuing death." So now, who will be the Antichrist? He will be a Hasidic Jew along the lines of Chabad Lubavitch, a Kabbalist mystic and enforcer and promoter of halakha law, which also includes the rules for the Gentiles, the so-called Noahide laws. How do I know this? Hasidic thought draws heavily on the Lurianic Kabbalah. It wouldn't surprise me if this individual would be some type of Grand Master in Hermetic Kabbalah. That's a form of Kabbalah that delves into mysticism and the occult. Scripture says that he's going to perform miracles, bring fire down from heaven, give breath to the image of the beast. It must be stated that traditional Judaic views of Kabbalah consider it an original belief system within the Jewish religion, which came out of Babylon and out of Persia. It is Hermetic Kabbalah that's the foundation of many, many other occult orders and religions. Some examples are Freemasonry, the Order of the Golden Dawn, the Brotherhood of Luxor, Knights Templar, the Rosicrucian Order, just to name a few of them. Its practitioners are the likes of Manly P. Hall, A.E. Waite, John Dee, Aleister Crowley, among a lot of others. The members of the Hasidic Chabad Lubavitch believe that the 7th Rabbi of Chabad will become the king of the Jews and the king of the world. So here's the situation. Some Hasidic Jews considered Menachem Mendel Schneerson the 7th Rebbe, the Messiah, but he died on June the 12th, 1994. However, they believe in reincarnation. Now, the Hasidic qualification for prophet, according to the Talmud, Shabbos 92a, the divine presence only rests upon a prophet who is 30 years of age or older, wise, mighty, wealthy, and tall. Qualification for the Messiah, according to Judaism 101, is that the Messiah will be a great political leader descended from King David. It wouldn't surprise me at all that all of this testing, this DNA testing, is being used to determine the most direct descendant of the Davidic line. Just as the search continues right now today for the perfect red heifer, that must be sacrificed for the dedication of the temple. The Messiah ben David must have a direct lineage to David. So whether this testing is being used to acquire the DNA needed to clone or to create a test tube baby to artificially inseminate someone, I can only speculate at that. But according to JewFAQ.org, the Mashiach, son of David, he will be well versed in Jewish law, observant of his commandments. He will be a charismatic leader, inspiring others to follow his example. He will be a great military leader who will win battles for Israel. He will be a great judge who makes righteous decisions. But above all, he will be a human being, not a god, demigod, or other supernatural being. Before the time of the Mashiach, there will be war and suffering. The Mashiach will bring about the political and spiritual redemption of the Jewish people by bringing back the diaspora to Israel and restoring Jerusalem. He will establish a government in Israel that will be the center of all world governments, both for Jews and Gentiles. He will rebuild the temple and reestablish its worship. He will restore the religious court system of Israel and establish Jewish law as the law of the land. That's in jewfac.org/Mashiach. You can check it out for yourself. This second beast prophet will, after 3.5 years, actually claim to be the Messiah. Let's look at Daniel again. Daniel 9:27. And he shall make a strong covenant with many for 1 week. And after half of the week he shall put an end to the sacrifice and offering. And on the wing of abominations shall come one who makes desolate, until the decreed end is poured out on the desolator. So, how will this Antichrist put an end to the sacrifices? By proclaiming, I am the promised Messiah. You have made an end to your transgressions, and I am here. There is no longer any need for animal sacrifices. That's how he will take his seat in the temple. His seat. So, who is the one who makes desolate? That's none other than Jesus Christ, Yeshua HaMashiach. He will make the Noahide law-observing state of Israel, including Jerusalem, and those who pledge their allegiance to it, desolate with the 7 bowls of his wrath. It says, until the decreed end is poured out on the desolator. The decreed end to this false prophet is found in Revelation 19:20. And the beast was captured, and with it the false prophet, who in his presence had done the signs by which he had deceived those who had received the mark of the beast and those who worshipped its image. These two were thrown alive into the lake of fire that burns with sulfur. We also see in Thessalonians 2:8, and the lawless one will be revealed, whom the Lord Jesus will kill with the breath of his mouth and bring to nothing by the appearance of his coming. Revelation 14:12. Here is the call for the endurance of the saints, those who keep the commandments of God and their faith in Jesus. You know, my friends, the harvest is coming. But it's not what most people think. It's not going to be some holy rapture or a divine catching up to meet Jesus in the air. It's going to start off with mass genocide of those who hold the commandments of God and faith in Jesus Christ. You know, there's going to be unrelenting executions of people who do not deny Jesus Christ and accept the mark. Those who accept the Noahide laws. You know, even today, false prophets, they're popping up everywhere, including the Messianic community. They're trying to convince the masses to renounce Christ as divine. Matthew 24:29 through 13 reads, "They will then deliver you up to tribulation, to put you to death, and you will be hated by all nations for my name's sake. Then many will fall away. They will betray one another and hate one another. And many false prophets will arise and lead many astray. And because lawlessness will abound, the love of many will wax cold. But the one who endures to the end, the same shall be saved." You know, of my heart, I can state from Philippians 1:21, "For me to live is Christ, and to die, that's gain." I hope you've enjoyed this program. Go to Take on the World TV on the YouTube channel to watch more, not only my show, but many others. And with that, shalom.